Good afternoon. My name, Andrea told me, Christof Ellinghaus. I run a little boutique record label in Berlin, and it's called City Slang, and I just need to give you a little bit about my background because it's part of the whole story. City Slang I've been doing this for 32 years. It's an independent label. We release, here's our website. I didn't have anything else right now but the website. Bands like Lamb Chop, Arcade Fire, Caribou, Sonlux, recently Roosevelt, Jose Gonzalez, Noga, Erez, Efterklang, stuff like that. If you've never heard any of these bands, that's cool, that's fine. If you have, I like you even more. I'm very opinionated about my music. My wife calls me a music Nazi because she doesn't often agree with my opinions, but the reason I'm saying this is because I was able to turn my hobby, my great passion from the year about 15, 16 into my profession. I got away with it, working with these great artists and bands, and actually making a living, supporting a family with it. I did it again almost 10 years ago. I was really into wine, and we decided after one great Radiohead show that Berlin needed a wine bar where you could get late night good wine. And it wasn't existing. At that time, I think, 2012, 13, good wine was in the hands of very uncool people, and Tuesday nights, 11 o'clock, you couldn't really find a decent bottle of wine in Berlin anymore. So we opened a wine bar, called it Kordo. It looked like this, lots of wine. We hired a young chef from Vienna, Lukas Mraz. He cooked up a storm up there, and this thing became a huge success. The mixture of the wines, the hosts, the food, it just became this crazy runaway success. And in fact, it was so busy and so buzzing that the police showed up twice a week. It was pretty wild. It was a late night. It started early with the diners and became a late night affair. We did this for 5 years, and the cops showed up more often and more on a regular basis. And so we kind of pulled the plug in 2018, took a step back from the microphone, took a step back and thought, okay, what do we do? And we said, let's do it, let's do a tame restaurant. So we made a major reconstruction, major redesign here, like that. And finally just called it Kordo, and even got rid of the glass, and did our thing. And then in March, it was in March 2020, we received out of the blue a Michelin star. And this was 5 days before the first lockdown, so we really didn't benefit from it all that much. We got it. We made it through the pandemic, and we're still here, and we keep getting the star, and we got a green star this year, which we again didn't really ask for, but they gave it to us. But the reason I'm giving you this whole background story, this long intro, is that the origin of this story actually happened in this country in the summer of 2020. My wife and I went on a road trip. We love to do these things. We drove through Bavaria and Austria, Italy, and ended up in Slovenia. Ended up eating at your wonderful restaurant in the middle of an intense heat wave, and it was amazing. It was friggin' incredible. It was really one of those meals, unforgettable. What do I say? I wrote it down because it's just a meal that you don't eat in any other place of the world. I hope you've all been there. If you haven't, go. It's the presentation, the philosophy, everything, the meticulous detail that is being put into the food blew our mind. And so we sat there, and something wasn't right. By the way, you weren't there. You were somebody told you were in Milan on that evening. maybe that's the reason for what happened next. So we sat, we sat there, we eat these, look at this is amazing, these are beautiful, beautiful plates, and yet something was odd. And after a while it just dawned on me, we had a companion. The music was this guy, Kenny G, the entire evening. It was amazing and weird. And I was telling you the music Nazi story because I was literally sitting there. Is he going to stay? What's he going to have for dessert? This is, in case you don't know, this is Kenny G. He's a giant of American supermarket background music. He has sold 75 million albums. He's the best-selling instrumentalist of all times. He is the sound of smooth. You've just heard it. He's been nominated for 16 Grammys. He only won one for this piece of music that we just heard. And he made it into the Guinness Book of Records in 1997 for playing the longest note ever recorded on a saxophone. Using circular breathing, and I have no idea what that is. He held an E flat for 45 minutes. That's it's almost a quarter of the menu in New York City. So he also has a handicap close to Tiger Woods. So he's a man of a worldly man. So this man was our dinner companion for the evening. We had traveled through half of Europe to dine with Kenny G. Okay, I'm not going to dwell on this for much longer. I'm sure it just kicked. We just happened to be on the one day of the year where somebody decided that this restaurant loves a smooth saxophone, and but we started a discussion there and a thought process. And it was also, we sat in the bungalow part, the glass thing, and it was really also quite loud. So he was quite present, he was just with us the whole great meal. The meal is still unforgettable. And then we thought about this, and we thought about, wait, so remember the time we went to Noma? And sometimes you get the tour, this and that. And there was this guy at Noma who told us when he served the coffee that they worked on the drip of this coffee for 6 months. 6 months they spent on the ideal drip to get to the coffee that they wanted to spend us. And it just made me thought, God, the attention to detail, 6 months. I mean, come on. So how many of the chefs here go to such extremes in your kitchen? You meticulously choose all your produce. You develop these plates with huge detail. You elaborate on your art, on your presentation, on your plating. But then, what do you do about the music? Anyway, we get to that. So there's the five senses. We've heard them before. The touch, the sight, the smell, and the taste. The 4 of them, and our top restaurants of the world. They strive to deliver on all of them, right? So a welcome experience. An all-out attack on all of our senses. But the 5th sense, unfortunately, often gets forgotten, the hearing. All those sensing organs, they are associated with each one of these senses. They send information to the brain, ideally to help us understand and perceive the world around us. And the 6th sense gets catered to by the dishwasher? That's not happening, is it? So we've been thinking about this, and Andrea and I have been discussing this at great length about what could be done about the fact that all these restaurants, all your great restaurants, do amazing jobs, and the dishwasher gets to pick the music, or maybe the trainee, or the sommelier who knows every inch of every parcel in Burgundy, but grew up on his or her parents' ABBA collection, you know. So having said that, I mean, okay, what's the solution? Is there a solution to this? There's a new breed of restaurateurs. I think some of them might be here. Don't all be insulted. There's a new breed of restaurateurs who go to other extremes. Do you know this guy? He's not a Teletubby. He's Billy Wagner. He runs Nobelhart and Schmutzig, which is the current number 17, I think, on the list of 50 best in Berlin. No, not 50 best in Berlin, but 50 best in the world. He's in Berlin. He's a good friend. He pretty much does everything right. He's very political. He does all the things that he starts the community of farmers and producers around him. He really puts a lot of thought into this thing and is very loud and outspoken about it as well. And I mean, that's him. I said, come on, pose with your music station. It looks like a record store, right? So here's another one, another place in Berlin. You wanna take a picture, Andrea? Here's another restaurant. They play vinyl and. Look, there's a record from me in the background, and they pay a lot of attention. They read the room and they play the music accordingly, and yeah, I mean, some of the restaurateurs and chefs around the world have started to pay attention to the music, maybe as much as to their dishes. I did a little research. Andy helped me to reach out to a lot of chefs. Very few came back. My favorite quote came from our non-interpretational friend Alberto here, who wrote, "With music, my restaurant doesn't look like a funeral." Which I think makes perfect sense. I mean, that was a very simple answer. I mean, it's about. He said, of course I'm playing music. It influences the music of the people, and my restaurant doesn't look like a funeral. So most chefs who spoke to me about the music in their restaurants described it like Alberto here: lift the mood, create a vibe. And I mean, even that leaves a far range. How many people of you have been to a restaurant in New York? I mean, that's like, most of the restaurants I've ever been to in New York are like sitting next to a plane landing. And I don't know why that is, but it is in New York. I find it unbearable. I try to avoid the city because, you know, they play music, you can't hear anything. You can't hear the guy sitting next to you, and I'm not complaining like an old man. I think this goes up from your college dropouts. They can go to New York restaurants. Everyone who's older than that, probably not. What is the key to the musical ambience in restaurants? I'm not saying that we've done the ideal job at Kordo, but because it was a wine bar, because we wanted it to be loud, we hung speakers in literally every corner of the long restaurant, and it's not very pretty, and we didn't have the money back in the day to do the whole like beautiful installation, but I'm just gonna run you through the amount of things we did there, and there's a lot of them. Oops, and there's a lot more. And then when we don't know what to do with records, we hang them on the ceiling as well. So I think one of the key is, as you see here, membranes. Lots of membrane surface, because then you don't have to crank it as loud. It can come quite clear, and lots of people can still have a decent conversation. I think acoustics are very, very, like, to me, as I said, with regards to the New York restaurant, acoustics super important. The thought process went on between Andrea and me about what should happen in a restaurant. What I actually come to the conclusion will never happen, but we'll get to that. What should happen in the super fine dining situations where, I mean, it's almost when you put down the plates in your restaurant, Anna, it's a synchronized effort. So let's think ballet, right? It's like a groove. So I think this guy answered my questionnaire and said, we play music to link with the movements of our guys during the service. So if you go to Lido 84, you see a staff moving to the movement, to the vibe of the music. I think that's pretty close to the ideal scenario of the high-end dining performance. And no, I'm not expecting every restaurant in the world to be able to do that in the near future. But maybe, and I think this is what's going to happen, is that some people will do it. Maybe not in that sort of over-the-top crazy, what's that Copenhagen place, that's Alchemist? Yeah, I'm not even thinking in that way, but because that's probably annoying. but in a cultured, and I mean, this is about elevating the food. The restaurant, people come to the restaurant because they want to eat your food. So I think the wine pairing should always elevate the food. And I think the music and the vibe should also elevate the food. Like, that's the server of the future. Maybe, maybe not. But I think that this quote here from Giancarlo Carmanini, it gets very close to that highest state, to the nirvana of the holistic high-end dining experience, and when it finally feels like the whole thing is one big performance. And so we were thinking, what is the staff moves in the rhythm and the cadence to the music on the stereo, and the food in front of you is elevated by a soundtrack. And so we know the word soundtrack, we know this word from Hollywood, from the soundtrack, like a Hollywood film. And I mean, a good Hollywood film. Actually, let's go back. A great Hollywood film, because there's so much pap being produced in Hollywood. Let's say like an A24 film, something really, really good, right? And so we've made a list. We've made a list at some point of people matching people up, and we are going to try it next year at Kordo, where I've got 2 Oscar-nominated soundtrack composers they're going to be coming in, and I'm going to let them eat the menu one evening, and then they're going to have to go back and think of something up, and then sometime later, when we still hopefully have the same menu, they're going to come in and perform live to this menu. And that's an experience, an experiment and an experience that we're going to need to try and figure out if it makes sense, if the staff is able to turn it around. But we're going to at least try it. We might fail, but we're going to try it. But I'm also obviously in the lucky position to have this record label, so I can just turn to I work with a band called Tindersticks, and Stuart Staples, the main guy from Tindersticks, he's made 10 soundtracks for Claire Denis. I don't know if you all know the filmmaker Claire Denis, but so Stuart's made a lot of these soundtracks, and he's very, I said, create me an ambiance for my restaurant, and he said, let me dine first. But yeah, so we're doing that. We're having our musicians do playlists for us to help us with the vibe. I have to tell you though, and Andrea, this is what we need to discuss. When I'm not there, and this has been playing for 3 nights in a row, the staff just cheekily goes back to Kenny G, or whatever the hell they want to hear. So that's the real problem. The discipline of keeping, and they don't want to feel like they're working in what are these stores, Abercrombie and Fitch, where they were just hammering this horrible music, and every day is the same. So the staff is obviously key to holding on to the great musical virtues of the restaurant situation. But we are going to keep trying, and this whole speech is really just to encourage you and the Prime Minister now to come in. It's just to encourage you restaurateurs and you chefs. Please think a little bit more about the music and a little bit more about the ambience of your restaurants. Thank you very much.